Hello, welcome to part 2 of how to make aluminum can Windspinner. Where we left off on part 1, we had all 6 of our cans marked out with our guidelines, and we chose whether we wanted the tops or the bottoms cut off our cans, depending on how we wanted our Windspinners to look. We talked about that in the previous video. Let's go ahead and pick the 2 cans we want to go together to make the one spinner, and we'll start with that. Now that we have our 2 cans ready, you're going to need your pair of scissors and some gloves. I typically don't wear gloves just because I'm used to working with the can, but you definitely don't want to get poked by some of these sharp edges, so I'd recommend wearing some gloves. So where we made our guidelines on our can, we're just going to take our scissors and we're going to follow those guidelines all the way down and just try to keep it in a straight line all the way around, and just spot out your guidelines and just make strips all the way around the can. So I'll go ahead and start. When I'm cutting the tops of the can, I stop cutting right before the bend in the can, so where it gets kind of hard here and it starts to bend down, I stop right before that, and that gives me a good reference point of where to stop all the way around the can. So I continue doing that for the rest of my strips. Just keep looking for those guidelines to keep you semi-straight. And you just keep doing your strips all the way around. So now that you have all the strips cut out, you're going to get your other can and do the same. So I already cut this one. And so you have your top and your bottom, or whatever design that you chose to make. And where I stopped cutting on this bottom one is about there, all the way around. See? I just try to keep it in the same spot all the way around. We're going to set our scissors aside for right now, and we're going to pick one of our cans. So what I do is I just kind of use my thumb as a guide, and I kind of pull them to where they look kind of even, where you had made your cuts. I just kind of bend them to where they kind of match up. You just keep bending them out a little bit. And you don't want to like put your thumb up here and then bend, because you want them to be all at the same level or close to it. They don't have to be super perfect, but you want them to kind of look, I don't know if you can see that, but you want them to kind of be at the same level around. So you want to come down and make it level with the rest of them all the way around, and just keep using kind of your thumb as your guide and just bend them out a little bit. You can kind of pull on them to get them the right level. So you just keep bending your little arms out all the way around till you get towards the end. So it should look like this. So you're going to do the same to your other can. I just set my thumb like on the edge as a guide. So when I bend this one down, I can kind of just feel where to stop with my thumb. And you can just kind of feel like where you made your cuts, that's where it's going to stop. So that also helps. just go around and try to make them have kind of even bends. You don't want like a real sharp bend. Because if you bend the metal too much, it's gonna break. Okay, so now that I have it bent all the way around, I have the bottom done and I have the top done. Now that you have your two cans that you cut into strips, you're going to set one of your cans aside, and you're going to get your permanent marker and your marking stick that we measured out to 3 inches on the previous video. With our marking stick, we're going to hold it up against the can where the end of it butts up against the edge of the can, and we're going to hold it there, and we're going to lay it flat, and where we made our 3-inch mark, we're going to follow that down and make a mark on our can. So you continue marking all the way around your can at the 3-inch mark. Okay, last one. So we got this one all marked. I'm going to do the same to the bottom of my can and set the top part of my can to the side. I'm going to place the bottom of my colored pencil, my marking stick, up against the edge of the can, and I'm going to hold it in place. I'm going to find my 3-inch mark, and I'm going to continue to mark it at 3 inches all the way around the can. This one's a little tricky because it falls right on the black on the can, so I'll just kind of make an extra mark there. Same thing here, the 3-inch mark falls right on the black part of the can, so I'll just kind of try to do a little extra so I can see it. Same thing, just try to do a little extra so I can see it where it falls on the black part of the can. We have the bottom of our can marked, and we're going to get our scissors back out, and we're going to find our 3-inch mark, and we're going to cut. We're going to cut the end off. And we'll just continue to do that all the way around the can. Is find your 3-inch mark and cut on the line. Okay, now that we got the bottom part of our can, we're going to do the same to the top of the can. Is we're going to find where we marked our 3 inches, and we're going to cut the ends off. Okay, we're done with our top. So now we're done cutting the top and the bottom. For this next part, if you chose to do a top, I usually take this little part and bend it out and take it off. And I take off the pull tab. I take these two off so it doesn't prevent the spinner from spinning once I put the metal rod through the center. Now you're going to use your awl if you have one. If you don't have one, then just use something that has a firm point or a tip on it. What we're going to do with the awl, or whatever pointy tool you have, is we're going to find the center of this circle right here. We're going to slowly push down until it pops out. See? Doesn't really take a whole lot to make a hole in the center of it. If you chose to make a spinner with two tops, like this one, go ahead and poke a hole in the other top of your can like we did with this one. If you chose to do a top and a bottom of your can, that's what we're going to work on next. So set your top part aside now that you already have your hole. For the bottom of our can, we're going to have to find out how to get the center of the bottom of our can so we can put a hole in it. So this is what I do. There's many ways you can do it, but this works for me. I get a piece of paper, cut it into a little square so it'll fit over my can. And I hold it in place and I rub my finger around the bottom of the can. You can see it's kind of making an indent. You just want to hold it in place and kind of rub your finger on the bottom of the can so it makes an indent in your paper. And when you think you can see a good enough indent, like that, I get my scissors and I'll cut out the circle. Okay, so now I have my circle. Put the scrap piece to the side. So with your circle, you fold it in half. And then you fold it in half again. So now you have a little piece, and you're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut just a little tiny snip off the point. Kind of like that. And then when you unfold it, you should have something close to the center. Something that'll make it easier to make your paper a little more firmer is either do it on a piece of cardstock or go over it with a couple pieces of tape to laminate it. I'll show you what I mean. So if you want to laminate your circle, just get a piece of tape and make sure it's something smooth that the tape will lift off from, that you're setting your piece of paper on, and cut a strip of tape. And tape one side and flip it over. Cut another piece of tape and then lay that on the top. Now we're going to cut around our piece of paper, leaving just a little bit of tape around the edge. Put our scraps to the side. So now we're going to want to do the fold again, where we're going to fold it in half and then fold it in half again and then cut the little bit of the tip off. And now you have a laminated piece that you can use over and over again. that makes it a little more sturdy. See, it sits on there much nicer now. So I even it up again, go straight down, and make your dot. So now that we found the center of our can, you're going to need your awl or a nail and your hammer. You can also use a drill and drill out the center of the hole. This is what works for me, so this is what I use. So I line the tip of my awl with that dot that we made for the center of our can, and I hold it straight up and down. I take my hammer, I tap a few times on the bottom of the awl till I see that it makes a hole all the way through the can. And it really doesn't take much to make a hole in the bottom of your can. And that's how we find the center and make a hole in the bottom of our can. At this point, I take the time to clean up some of the marks that was left behind from the permanent marker. So I get the fingernail polish remover and a cotton round and grab one of my cans. Start going over any little permanent markers that I see got left behind. It is easier to take off the permanent marker if you don't let it sit for days on the can. So far, I found that the fingernail polish remover doesn't remove the color on the can, not unless you're really having to scrub in one area. So I'm just going to go over them and remove all the marks on all the cans. In the previous video, I talked about the long nose pliers with the cutters that you might need for your supply list. But for this part, I actually like to use the chain nose pliers, mainly because they have the spring and my long nose pliers doesn't. It just makes it easier for this next part. Now we're actually going to start assembling our can into making our spinner. Let's grab one of our cans. So this part, we're going to clamp down on one of our strips towards the top, and we're going to be bending it over to make a tab. And before I start to bend it, I make sure like this looks kind of straight, opposed to like having it like this where it's angled. I want it to look more straight so that when I bend over my tab is more straight. So I'm going to bend this one. See? And then I bend it like that, and then I go ahead and just kind of push it over on the back side. So it looks like that. You don't want to be bending this tab out and then back in more than once because you risk it breaking. And you're going to need your little tabs. I'll do another one. I kind of line it up. I make sure this part is more straight, and then I hold this part here and I just make it a little bend like that, and then I just use my hands to push in the rest so that I'm not creating like a really harsh bend right here at this point. So then you just continue making little tabs all the way around your can. And you do that with both of your cans, just the same way. See? Just making little tabs all the way around. Alright. One more to go. Oh, missed one. We got all the tabs done on the top part of our can, and this is what it looks like from underneath. And this is what it looks like from up above. Now I need to do the same thing to the bottom of my can. So I've bent the little tabs around the bottom and the top of my can. See, here's the bottom and the top. For this part, we're going to be putting the cans together. and attaching them. And before we do that, I like to line up the can so that the pattern matches. And how we did that is when we put our guidelines on our can to cut out these little strips. In the previous video on part 1 is that we lined up our guidelines in the same spot on all of our cans. And so then when we cut them out, they were the exact same on both of the cans so that the pattern would line up for us. So real quick, before we put these two together, when you're making your other wood spinners to put together, you're going to want them to spin in the same direction. Make sure you take a mental note or write it down of how you had your cans placed just to make it easier. So you had your top on the right hand side and you had your bottom on the left hand side. So when you connect them all together, that they spin the same way and that you don't have one spinning this way and one spinning this way. I like mine to spin all in the same direction. So if you made a spinner with two tops, it doesn't really matter how you put it together because you can just flip it over to have it spin in whatever direction you want. Now that I have the design on both cans set up the way I want it, so I'm going to grab these two and I'm not going to let go so I don't get them mixed up with these other ones. So I'm going to hang on to the two that I want to go together. I'm going to flip it over, still hanging on to them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this one on top of the other one, and I'm going to slide it all the way up, and then I'm going to pull it down to lock it in place. You'll feel that it, with your tabs that you made, it when you put it down on top of there and then you slide up and then you pull down, it kind of locks it in place. I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to bend this tip down, and that's going to lock them in place where they're not going to move. So before I do that, I don't want to bend the tip over when they're like this, because you can see, like, you know, you can see that they're not locked in place correctly. You want these two to line up. I'll put my thumb on that corner to hold it there while I get my pliers. I know some of these other arms get in the way, so hopefully you can see this. Now that I have it locked in place and where I want it, I'm gonna clamp on and I'm gonna rotate it back to make another tab. And then I push down. Now you've made your first tab. I take my pliers and I just pinch it. You don't want to push real hard because you risk the metal breaking. So from here, after you made your tab joining your first two strips, you're going to turn it in. You're going to grab the next two strips that are right next to the two that you put together, and you're going to do the same. Is you're going to put the one on top of the other, slide it up, and then pull down, and you can feel where it stops again. And then I like to line this part up, and then I'll put my thumb to hold it there. And then sometimes I just give an extra little smush down. You get your pliers again. You come down a little bit, like that, and then you bend it over to the back side. And then I finish pushing mine over with my thumb. You can see how it's still sticking up some. And that's where I take my pliers and I go over that section again. So just kind of go over until it's flat. So then you just continue to do the same by grabbing the next two that are right next to the two that you made. You don't want to skip one and grab this one and then try to put those two together, because your wind spinner is going to turn out really wonky. So you want to make sure you grab the two that are right next to the two that you already put together. I just continue that all around as I take the next two and I latch them together, put one on top of the other, line it up, and then bend my tip, push it down, flatten it out a little bit. Alright, we're done with our first wind spinner. Now that you know how to make your first wind spinner, you can go ahead and make your other two wind spinners for the project that we're doing in the video. When you get your first wind spinner done, sometimes, no matter how precise you try to be in putting it together, they can spin a little wonky. Sometimes you'll put together a wind spinner and you won't have any problems with it spinning wonky. How I found out how to fix that was I take one of my metal rods, you make a loop at the end so your wind spinner has a stopping point, and I put a few beads on to help the wind spinner spin. And I kind of make this one my tester rod so that I can test my other ones with it. So what you do is you'll put your wire rod through the bottom and bring it up through the top. You'll blow on it, watch it spin, and you'll watch this rim up top to see where the highs and the lows are. So how I check to see how well it spins is I will hold it up straight up and down. So I'll look at it like level, and I'll pay attention to the top rim of how it spins, and then I will blow on it to make it spin, and I'll watch that top and see where I need to adjust it. So you can see that the left hand side is sitting lower and the right hand side is sitting higher. So how I adjust that, I'll change the angle so I can show you how I adjust that. At this angle I'm watching, I can see where my low side is. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab that with my thumb. So I just tweak it like this. And then this sometimes takes several tries, and then I'll put it back on. And I'll blow on it again and see where I'm at. Okay, so I see that right here where my thumb is a low spot where when it spins, this part's lower and this part's higher. So I'm gonna pull this part up to make it level with this part. Hopefully bring this part down and this part up so it equals out. So I'm just gonna kind of grip just this top part of the can. I'm not gonna try to mess with any of the strips. I'm just gonna be twisting this top part. So I wanna kind of bend it like that. Put it back through, give it another test. So I keep this process going until I'm happy with how it spins. Just stay with it, kind of practice of twisting the top and then flipping over and checking the bottom too, because the bottom can be the problem of why it's not spinning straight. So at this point you should have your 3 wind spinners put together and tested to make sure that they spin straight. So now we're going to set 2 of our wind spinners aside and just work on the one for right now. So for this part, we're going to be making one section of the spinner so we can link them all together. So you will need your wire rod, a permanent marker, your round nose pliers, your long nose pliers with a cutter, some beads, and your spinner. How I make a loop is I clamp my pliers on to my metal rod, and I have a reference point of my thumbnail. So I'll set the pliers to the bottom of my thumbnail. If it doesn't go much past my thumb, that's where I want to bend the wire so that I have plenty of wire to make the loop. And if I made it shorter, then I wouldn't have enough wire to make a full loop. So this is about the sweet spot for me of how I like to do it. So I'll make my bend. So that's what my bend looks like. Now to make the loop, you're going to take your round nose pliers, you're going to put your palm up, you're going to lay your round nose pliers in your palm, you're going to put your long part of your wire out like straight in front of you, and your bend is going to be up, because what you're going to do is you're going to be clamping on with your round nose pliers, and you're going to be rolling this back on itself to make your loop. So you put your wire out in front of you with your palm up and your pliers in your palm. You're going to grab a hold. It kind of feels awkward because you have your wrist twisted. Then you start to roll it back on itself like that. Each time I do this, there'll always be a little shaping to do because I'm not really good at it. So what I do is I stick my round nose pliers back in and I pull forward so it brings the loop forward more, and then it still looks pretty wonky. That's okay, we'll work on it. And I stick my pliers back in here and then I bend it like that, All right, that looks probably even worse. It's okay, it's okay, I'm still working on it. So then I'll stick them back in there, then I'll bend it forward. All right, that's looking a little better. We're getting there. And then I just keep bending it and playing with it till I get the shape that I want. And then I can see that it goes crooked off to one side. So I'm gonna grab the flat nose pliers and I'm going to straighten it up. You just keep playing with it till you get the shape that you want of your loop. So now you're going to want to pick out the beads that you're going to put on your spinner. And I'm matching the color of the beads to my wind spinners because I have a white one and I have a teal one. So when I string them all together, then it all kind of matches. So now with your loop that you just made at the end of one of your wire rods, you're going to put your beads in whatever pattern you want them to be on your metal rod. And so there's my first set, and now I'm going to put my wind spinner on my metal rod. I'm going to go through the bottom, go up through that little hole that we made in the top, and then there's part of it. Then we're going to put our other beads on top. So now we have our 5 beads on each end of our metal rod. So now we're going to need to bend this end of our wire. So I bend it pretty close to this bead, our last bead. Then I clamp my pliers close to the bead where the beads don't have any movement. And then I push down and make my bend. So now we bent our wire. The same thing is I'll do my measurement with my thumb, but I'll go over just a little bit. You can see my last mark of where I marked it with my black permanent marker, and that's where I'll cut it. So you get your pliers and make your cut. So same thing, you'll hold your palm up and put your pliers in your palm, then clamp on where it's kind of flush, and then start bending your wire back towards you. What my loop looks like. I know I gotta go in and fix it up, so I think first I'll straighten it out a little bit. Then I'll bend it back, bend it forward, just kind of reshape it here. Even if your loop turns out pretty messed up like mine did, you can always kind of work on reshaping it, so don't get discouraged. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So now we made our first link of our wind spinner. Go ahead and do the same thing to your other 2 wind spinners, and then we'll come back and link them together. Now you should have 3 of your wind spinners made with your beads put on and the loops made on each end. Now I have my colors decided, where I'm going to put blue on the top, white in the middle, and pink on the bottom. Now we're going to be linking the 3 together, and I'm going to add the swivel to the top. Know that I'm going to link the bottom of my blue one to my white one. So I'll go ahead and open up this one just a little bit to attach it to this loop. Now I'm going to hook the bottom of the blue one onto the top of the white one. Now I'm going to close up the loop. So I got these 2 linked together. I opened up the loop just a little bit on the pink one so I can add it to the bottom of the white one. Now we're going to close up the loop. Now I have the 3 wind spinners attached together. Now I'm going to attach my swivel to the top of my blue can. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the top of the blue one. Put on my swivel and close up the loop. I added the hook to the swivel. Because the cans are aluminum, it's pretty light, so close this loop or secure it so that a strong wind won't blow it off its hook. At this point, you can be done with your wind spinner, or sometimes I like to add what I call a tail to the bottom. So I'll work on that next. Usually add about 9 to 12 beads for my tail and about 3 or 4 of the hex nuts. I usually add 1 bead first, then a couple of the hex nuts, and then I'll add the rest of my beads. So now that I have the beads put on, I'm going to make a loop at this end to close it off. Did the same way as I showed you before, is I put my beads on, made my bend, and then measured it out a little bit over my thumbnail, and then we're going to get the round nose pliers and bend it back to make our loop. So now I have a loop made on both ends. At this point, you can choose to attach something to dangle at the bottom. It can be something handmade, or it can be something that you bought. I went ahead and put a little swivel at the bottom of mine because I make a little flower that I cut out of the cans using my Sizzix machine. I didn't share how I made the flower at the bottom of the wind spinners because they no longer make the dies that cut out my flower shapes that I use with my Sizzix machine. I'm going to go ahead and attach this to the bottom. Okay, I have my tail attached to the bottom, and I have the rest of my spinner. We're almost complete. All we have to do is add the dangle to the bottom. Attach the flower that I made out of the cans to the end of my wind spinner. I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you make one for yourself as well as give one away as a gift. Bye!